Welcome to the L3 podcast, also known as Love, Lies, and Lifestyles. No living person is exempt from love, the lies, and living a particular lifestyle. From sex to building wealth, this show is solely to entertain, enlighten, and empower. All topics discussed are strictly the opinion of the host and the guests that appear on the show. Here's your host, Dr. K. The Black community is angry. We are enraged and fed up. We are seeing the protests around the world and are grateful for those who are standing with and for us. I teared up seeing the protests in so many countries, especially ones that have political unrest. And yet, those countries stopped to protest the despicable police brutality in the US. Black people want to see something different after the protests. We need action. We demand action. We demand justice. And we will get it. Joining me today on L3 is Ray Jones, who's a mentor, father, and great friend. And alongside him is Kathy Sanders, who is a life scientist in the pharmaceutical industry. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to jump in and get started. So much happening in our community, so much to talk about. Really excited to jump into a couple of questions I have for both of you, as a lot of people want to be able to talk through and have these spaces to come to. So I'm glad that we're able to create that platform for them. So I first want to ask you, how can Black people disrupt the status quo at our jobs and in our communities? I'm going to throw that to Kathy first.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me here. I have to say, to begin with, you were right on time. I've been thinking about ways in which I can contribute, and I think this is an excellent platform. I hope your listeners enjoy this as well. I think there are very few distinct ways that we can be very disruptive in a positive and action-oriented way. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about personally, professionally, and on behalf of others is what we can do in the workplace. So I really appreciate this question. Some of the things that I think would be very valuable are to begin to, if you haven't been already, bringing your true self to the table in the workplace. And what I mean by that is, while you manage the dynamics and the politics of your workplace, which are different everywhere, so you can't stray too far from what the norm is in the workplace, but you can speak up and you can use your voice in different ways. You can challenge the status quo by making sure that if things come up that aren't positive or that aren't valuable to you, that you actually speak up. And I think a lot of times people in our position, Black people in America, are encouraged not to do so because of fear of repercussion, because of fear of being othered or further othered in the workplace. I think now is the time more than ever to speak up. We've seen CEOs and other leadership in our companies putting out statements. Hold them to it. If you're in a company where your CEO hasn't at least at a minimum put out a statement, because really that's not hard to do about a political issue, then you need to start asking questions. And you need to be strategic about who you're asking questions of and who you're asking action of, because now is the time. We haven't seen a turnout like this for protests for the importance of Black lives in the United States in a very, very long time.
Or anywhere else around the world. I think that's what's more touching.
I've never seen this number of people come forward in my lifetime.
Right.
Now is the time. We cannot slow down. We cannot sit down. We cannot be quiet. We must be who we are, and we must be accepted as who we are. And disruption is not a negative thing. I know some people don't want to disrupt because for fear of losing a job, etc. We are in a very acute crisis due to a healthcare pandemic, so it could be even scarier during these times. But haven't we seen the people in the streets who aren't afraid? Haven't we seen people in the streets protecting themselves with masks, but standing up for Black lives? Yeah. This is an unprecedented bringing together of two events,
right?
The likes of which we may never see again in our lifetime. If not now, then when? So please use the platforms that you have at your workplace to make sure that in business, we are also being considered for who we are, what we can bring to the table, and how we can help the company through this time.
I'm gonna jump to Ray right quick to find out what does he think that we can do as Black people to disrupt the status quo at our jobs and in our communities.
Well, I agree with Kathy a great deal in the sense that this is the climate right now. What's going on right now, I believe, is actually changing the status quo. I believe it's the fact that we have a vast majority of people from different cultures and different countries and so forth, acknowledging the injustices that have been perpetrated upon our people, that this is the time to change legislation. This is the time to amend things, to hold law enforcement and the legal system accountable for indicting people who perpetrate these atrocities, blatant atrocities,
Agreed.
where they try to just defy what we see. Like, we literally see these things happening, and they tell us, "Oh no, we need to wait. There's more that needs to be revealed, or there's something that you did not see," to try to give explanation to the injustice. So also, I think, like, when it comes to the workforce and the workspace, we all come from diverse backgrounds. Some people are more established than others, economically, educationally, and so forth. I think we just need to favor one another. Favor one another. In other words, I mean, I go places to shop and so forth, and I'm walk past for them to cater to a white face.
Yes.
Just the other day, I was in Bed Bath Beyond, and a young Black woman just was less than helpful when I was, somewhat, trying to figure it out. Some basic stuff, but she walked past me to help someone else who didn't look like her,
Yeah.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, I think that's also rooted in self-love, loving oneself. That's also part of the cliche that everyone says. It's, look, to favor one another, you've got to favor yourself. You've got to love yourself, so that when we look at one another, we should see siblings, we should see mothers, we should see fathers, we should see our uncles, nieces, and aunts. And when they look at us, a lot of times they don't see that. They definitely don't see that, because the way we are treated represents that.
Right.
So
and how we treat each other, right? So it goes back to, I mean, the worst type of bondage we've ever been in is mental slavery.
Absolutely.
That's and to see that still happening. So when people look, they go, but they're not enslaved anymore.
Right.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Right. And until we're all set free, you can't say, well, I got there, I arrived. It's we have to get there. We have to arrive. And it is our duty, when I think about people like you, people like Kathy, people like myself, who have been blessed with resources and the knowledge, it is our responsibility to go back and educate the masses. It's our responsibility to give back to our communities in ways that we haven't been giving back to one another. We've become way too complacent with a lot of what we see happening. And now we've reached the tipping point where we're fed up. We should have been fed up.
Absolutely. And also we should have had other communities fed up and speaking out on our behalf as well. And that is a big part of what's going to change the status quo. The fact that other people are outraged, the fact that everybody has camera phones now, and we can capture things. It's no longer left to interpretation or someone else's word after they've done certain things to us in our community. So the fact that the whole world can see this, like, this is going back to the 60s in Vietnam and the atrocities that people saw, the civil rights movement, and all of these things. If it weren't for Malcolm X, Martin Luther King wouldn't have sat at the table with a lot of people. So the whole threat of people, rioting, if you will, of the whole concept of revolution is like somewhat real to people now.
Oh yes,
that's because what we see happening in other parts of the world, Korea and so forth. Okay, now it's here with us.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so I believe all of this is part of changing the status quo, the consciousness of other cultures. I think that's very important.
Absolutely, and that's the first time we're seeing that. which really excites me to see so many different people, especially for us as Black people, right? Like Kathy and I have been to so many countries, and to be Black means when traveling, we have to research what's the level of racism there, right?
Absolutely.
We have to know the temperature of racism in that country before we even make plans, right?
Wow.
The extent of the things that we have to do as Black people, right? People who are white and don't deal with discrimination, who don't have to deal with racism, can never even fathom what it feels like to be Black.
And
right?
the fact that we have to be chameleons as well.
Exactly.
It's like constantly adapting yourself
right.
to the environment for the comfort of other cultures.
Yes. Yes.
To make them feel less threatened.
Yes.
These are the type of things, that just has to change. I mean,
right.
and for us to acquire a comfort level, to be, as Kathy represented earlier, that she suggested earlier, that for us to have that comfort level to be who and what we are in our workspace and in our communities is still something we struggle to do.
Right. Which is a good segue, which takes me to then, what message do you have for Black people who have a seat at the table and are not speaking up?
Yes.
You're part of the problem.
Oh, absolutely.
You're part of the
problem. They're definitely part of the problem and perpetuating. I'm going to throw that to Kathy.
I think, thank you. And I really appreciate this question, because this is something that I think generally applies, but I think in this situation, it really is very, very important for us in the Black community. If you have a seat at the table, use it. Use it. You're in the room. You are at the table. You are with all of the appropriate stakeholders, whether they look like you or not. Use it. You're not always going to be met with a welcome ear. You're not always going to be met with agreement. But that's not the point. The point is to use it. It's not to wait until everybody agrees with you. It's to speak up and make people think. It's to speak up and make people feel the discomfort that will get us progress. Because that discomfort that people feel, that we've been accommodating for so long, is exactly where the work lies. I'm going to say that one more time. The discomfort that people feel with us, that we have been accommodating so long, is where the work lies. If we are not pushing people towards that discomfort, and it doesn't have to be demanding. We don't have to all come in and say, you're going to have this discomfort.
Right.
But if we are ushering people towards the discomfort, we are moving people toward the work. And what do I mean by the work? The work is exactly what people need to do to break down their misconceptions about Black people, to break down the privilege that they've been gliding through life on, to break down the concept that we are less than in any way, shape, or form, that we are not worthy, that we don't want to work, etc. I think a lot of times what other people are experiencing when they have these thoughts about us is our challenge to work in the environment that they give us.
Right.
That we have no ability to structure in the way we choose to. Our challenge is the fact that we're not trusted. So what can you do when you have that seat at the table? Use it. Speak.
I've always said that the oral history is so important, and that somewhere along the lines, for some reason, after that whole Black Panther movement, we seem to have lost that. And it's as if that education has not been passed down, like the indoctrination had stopped after that. And I think that's what we got to, even more of a place of comfort, and we're okay. And yeah, we see these things come up, and we've marched before, we've seen killings before, but it was something about, and it could have been how this all happened concurrently, right? But it's now, as we've seen this wasn't even just a murder. Let's be very honest. This was an outright public lynching. This was a hanging. This was a hanging of a Black man for the public to witness, as he had his hands in his pocket, kneeling on that man's neck, as to come watch me hang him.
Right.
I want you to come watch how they should be treated.
This man had 12 other incidences of, and they involve killings.
Yes.
They involve people dying. Okay.
People of color.
Absolutely. Right. So this man was obviously a psychopath. He should have long before been off the force. But the problem is that the type of people that it happened to are trivialized in society. They're not valued. Okay. Right. And so the whole Black Lives Matter thing was never an issue as it pertained to over other people's lives. It meant as well, meaning
yes,
we are valid. We have a right to be here. You understand what I'm saying?
Black people, as you're saying, no matter who you are, no matter what you're like,
right.
You know.
So I have a question. So for Ray, right, concerning like your father, the conversations in our household have been difficult. As we thought about like, well, what do we say, and going over our lines,
right.
you know, of making sure like, are we hitting everything? Are we telling them everything they need to know before they walk out the door? So that we know like, oh man, if we left this one line out, this would it make a difference? Right? It's terrifying trying to think of what to say to children. As a father, how do you even begin to have these conversations with your kids? And also thinking about if they get a seat at the table, what would you push for them to do?
I'll tell you, it's as a Black parent, you're limited in your ability to actually indoctrinate your children, because we've seen so many instances where people of color have done nothing wrong, have not acted aggressively, have not just, someone made a phone call and now they're accosted and set upon. I had a scenario the other day with a coworker whose child locked himself out of the house with the dogs. And the FedEx guy called the cops, and the cops showed up. And, you know, the situation could have turned south had my colleague not gotten over there prior to the police. Wow. At least the dog might have wound up dead, at least, you know.
Right.
So I think it's a very common conversation that Black parents have with their children about the basics of no sudden movements. If you're driving, don't reach for anything unless you give the instruction of where it's at, if you're going to get it. I mean, it's almost like a mantra. We all know it.
Yes.
We all know it. We're all fully aware. And then a lot of times it's the you know, what you say, what you don't say, your disposition. A lot of times they're taking your temperature. They just want to see if they can get a rise out of you, so that now they have the, you know, in their mind, the right to assault you if it is. So I mean, if my kids were ever to get a seat at the table, what I would want them to do is to look back and try to facilitate scenarios where other people of color are considered. And if you're in a position to put someone of color, of course, who is qualified or who might need, you know, the training to be in a such position, that you do so. You know, we all come from like different levels of economic backgrounds and educational backgrounds. So we don't all have the same empowerment. But going back to those people who have, once again, the seat at the table, those people a lot of times they're part of the system.
Yes.
Since they're part of the system, they don't want to lose their seat. And we all, to some degree, have been self-seeking. Why? Because we know we can't help everyone. We know that. And a lot of times we made effort to do such, and people kind of, you know, spat in our faces. Okay? So it's common causes that rally people together. And unfortunately, the killing of people of color right now is that common cause that's bringing everybody together, and it can facilitate other things like economic development, educational development, and things amongst our people of more value than just entertainment and materialism. So, you know, unfortunately, it took all of these deaths to bring people to the table to talk about real issues, real things like legislation that's really going to do something and protect us as a people. But these are the type of things that people have to get out there, and the peaceful marches that go on for a couple of days or whatever, and then people are forgotten about. No. Unfortunately, this havoc right now is the type of thing that invokes change, because when have you ever seen the New York City Police Commissioner, the mayor, have you seen governors from different states and mayors from on TV pleading? Pleading. Please, That doesn't happen. When have you ever seen the police commissioner apologize?
Right.
Condemn his officers? It's historically, it just hasn't happened.
Correct.
So they're also afraid. And the bottom line is, when you're at war, if you have nothing to bargain with, then guess what? If you have no fight back, if you have nothing to intimidate, okay, the other person, then guess what? They're going to have their way with you. And they've had their way.
Yep.
And so people are fed up and they're fighting back. And it's intimidating because it's threatening the economy. Because once you hit them in their pocket, just like going all the way back to the busing boycott.
381 days. There are only 365 days in a year. So the fact that 381 days, this is where I'm talking about the indoctrination that our children need, that our people need, because they underestimate our power.
We have a lot of scholars.
Oh, come on.
We have a lot of scholars, Black scholars, who've been out here, promoting this and talking about how we should, organize our dollars and the power that we have economically. But now this is the platform where people can potentially listen
and hear now
and organize.
Yes.
Okay. And actually direct our attention at specific organizations and institutions that aren't catering to us or giving us the proper level of respect that we deserve.
Absolutely. Why are we patronizing businesses, right? I was on a call yesterday and one of the ladies said to me, Hennessy put out a statement, right? And I said, they better with all the Black people buying Hennessy. Right? And so she said, man, she's like, you're right. And she said, but what she paid attention to is Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton owns Hennessy.
Okay. Oh,
and
really?
She said Louis Vuitton did not put out a statement.
Okay.
And she said they will not get my dollars anymore after that.
That's right. And that should apply to both Louis Vuitton and Hennessy. If that's as far as you're going to take it, it should apply to all their businesses, because the truth is, it's really the parent company that sets the tone, right? Yeah. So, for example, business, right? Because we were talking about how to operationalize that work. When I work in a business, if I shout from the mountaintop about what would make me feel whole in the workplace, that's great. But until someone at a more senior level starts to take action on that, what happens? So that's the same thing with Hennessy and Louis Vuitton, right? If Louis Vuitton is going to ignore this issue, then I would say that Black patronage of Louis Vuitton and all of its subsidiaries or their products.
Can you imagine if Black people stop buying Hennessy? Can you imagine?
So ladies, are we going to be selling our Louis bags?
So it's funny you say that. I have not used mine in so long. Seriously, it hangs in the closet. I haven't used it before the protests. I looked at it one day and I said, why do I have this? This is a legit conversation.
Good point, because I think there's something obviously unique. I mean, this is, never happened before, but there's something valuable about coming out of a pandemic that's caused us all to stay home. Think about our hands, think about our masks, and then think about how we can infect one another. Now, some people didn't care, that's true, but I think the vast majority of people were terrified. And there's something about being in that vulnerable state, barely coming out of that vulnerable state for areas in the country that were impacted, because not every place was and not every place shut down. But being in that state and then witnessing, a tragic loss of life, a murder like this, coming out of that state, I think it really hit people in a way that they wouldn't have felt it before if we were just going on as usual. We would have had attention to see it if they were just going on as usual, because they would have been thinking about, do I get another Louis bag or do I not get
we were all still.
Right.
And because we were all still, we were able to witness something horrific in the midst of us all being anxious and vulnerable. So for all of us to feel that vulnerability and to see this individual,
together,
surrender the most precious thing, which was his life.
Yes.
Okay. So all of this put us in a position to receive this in its essence.
Yeah.
Which was horrific.
And other people who aren't Black, because I think regardless of what's happening in the world and the pace that we're moving at, Black people feel this way anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, this was normal for us. I've already said white people had to live like Black people for 2 months and they couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle being told they had to stay in the house. They couldn't handle being told something was closed and you can't come in. They couldn't handle getting a curfew. They couldn't handle being questioned if they were somewhere they shouldn't have been. This is what we live every single day.
Oh, yeah. Talk to people who live in public housing.
Hello. People tapped into that for a moment, right? And it's not sustained for them because they can go back to not feeling it as quickly as they felt it. But they tapped into it for a moment because we were still. And I think that's something that's important for us to repeat and make sure that is amplified to people. If you hadn't have been still, this marching wouldn't have happened. And I firmly believe that's the case. And I really think people need to take a look at people who aren't Black, who wouldn't have experienced this way necessarily, really need to take a look at this, because the number of people who are not Black and who are not white as well, who reached out to me to have conversations of a certain type that maybe we've had in the past, but that were really feeling it, the urgency in a new way, was exponential. People from all over the world reached out to me, right? Like we talked about how we travel. And also people in this country, especially a number of friends who are Asian, because there was that Asian police officer who was the partner of the offending police officer, and he didn't do anything. And they talked about
it's his brother-in-law. That's his wife's brother.
But they talked about some of the cultural reasons why Asians may not speak up, but also that there is, this distinct challenge between Asian and Black communities that we have to parse apart, right? So a lot of these conversations, I think, are there. I've seen someone sent me some articles today about, prominent Asians speaking to Asians about this, right? Like someone sent that article to me and I was never more pleased to read that this morning, thinking, okay, well, that's work that's happening in community on behalf of Black people, how anti-Blackness in the Asian community needs to be managed. So we need to take advantage and amplify the fact that due to the stillness, this is what we saw. However, this is exactly what happened, when it was Tamir, when it was Trayvon, when it was, we Black people felt this the same way. We feel this, right? The only difference is we feel you feeling it with us. And that allows us to not only feel deeper, but to feel even more empowered, because we can't ignore it. The stillness, we benefited from the stillness. As terrible as coronavirus is and was, particularly in communities of color.
We're dying at the hands of police. We're dying from coronavirus. I have a better chance of living getting coronavirus than I am being Black walking down the street. I said, so for me to step out, or anyone else to step out and protest, when we think about and we weigh that, do I sit home because I don't want to get coronavirus? Or do I go out and march because I'm probably going to go to the hospital, they're going to fix me up and I'll be home, but I don't know if I'm going to make it home from jogging.
It's true.
So, when I put it in that perspective, then people are like,
people of color were dying disproportionately.
Right. But that's when they opened back up the country. When the stats came out and showed that Black people were dying disproportionately to whites, all of a sudden we're going to start opening back up the cities and states. Right? There's just no regard for our life. We are not seen as human.
States down south where we have higher proportionate numbers of Black
people. Of course. Florida and Georgia.
Yeah, the meat industry as well. They were saying, most of those workers were people of color.
Is that right? I don't think our responsibility to educate people. I do think there are myriad resources out there now that people can access and learn. And then maybe they can have conversations, right? And it's different to have a conversation than someone to come to you and say, what do I do? Well, I mean,
with white people, I am not, that burden is not on our shoulder. That's on their shoulders to figure out, right? Like they didn't need a manual when they gave birth. You don't need a manual to figure out how to just even have some basic sympathy or empathy even for us when we are killed in the street. And
when we're people, people experiencing anything, start with that, right? So when people come to me and say, what can I do? I'm reluctant to answer that question. But when I do answer, the question is usually you can educate yourself. The answer is usually you can educate yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Oh, yeah. After you've read it, you say, hey, I've read this. I've seen this. I have a question. I didn't understand when I read this and I heard like, now I'm ready to talk to you, but don't come to me and put that burden on me to educate you.
Like,
you are the oppressor.
To help me not oppress you is ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. Racism, Ray, I want to go to you. What are you saying?
No, I was just saying that racism for a large portion of white people is passive. It's subtle. It's not something that they're consciously aware of. They're not aware of the fact that they're racist. We think that racism is someone calling you a racial slur or something to that effect, or riding by and, doing, yelling, nigga, No, it's systemic, meaning it's in the workplace. It's in places of patronage. It's in the coffee shop.
And that's what exactly. That is the definition of racism.
And people are not conscious of it because we have all been conditioned into accepting certain belief systems, even about ourselves.
Yes.
Okay. Even about ourselves and about our own kind. So at the end of the day, it's like but one thing I wanted to say is we are not responsible for making white people feel comfortable.
Exactly.
The way you wear your hair and the subtleties of people say, just comments made about different things that express discontent with your personal choice, and your blackness, if you will. So I mean, I just feel like what you said, when people come to us and they inquire of something that maybe they were exposed to or something, and they want some level of explanation, or if they want to have a dialogue, that's one thing. But guess what? To sit at the table, if we're going to get to a place where we sit at the table and bring about some real change, then what is happening right now is the climate for it. And so once again, to digress back to the people who have that seat, if they're not going to do anything now, then they will never do anything.
Agreed.
This is the time.
Get your ass out that seat.
There's people might think out there, I'm not responsible for making them comfortable, and move on. But the responsibility that I see, that I take on, not all the time, this is not my life's mission. I live a full life. My life is not just about this. I have many things in my life, but this is a big part of it. I am comfortable moving people towards their discomfort and then seeing what they do. I don't provide them with a solution. I don't hold their hand. So there are levels to this that we absolutely have to understand, but it is not our responsibility to make someone comfortable. It is our responsibility to move towards discomfort. Otherwise, we don't move forward. And that's my personal opinion. Others may feel differently. I appreciate that, but I'm a person who will say, if I care about you or if I care about this experience, I'm going to move towards discomfort, because that's where the work lies. And if we don't, then we're going to stay stagnant where we are. And I think I've just dealt with that my whole life, and I'm not prepared to deal with that anymore. So that's the kind of work I'm willing to put in. I'm not doing ABCs and 1, 2, 3s with people. There are far too many.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that. And then Bobby, I'm going to throw to you and give you the last word. But an organization reached out to me a couple of days ago and told me they would like me to do some anti-racist trainings for them, right? And I said, let me be very clear with you. Unless you are ready for me to come be my authentic Black self and call you out as being racist, having perpetuated racism, and continuously oppressing people of color, then don't call me. Because that's the work that I'm coming to do. If you truly want to move forward and stand up and say, my name is so-and-so, I have perpetuated racism, and I'm ready to make a difference. I'm ready to do something different. Do not call me. You are wasting your time and my time. And there are places that truly want to get this right. And then there are places that it's a checkbox. Don't call me if it's checkbox for you. Call me if you really want to do this work. And if you want to dig deep within yourself and look at your soul and say, I have wronged people, but I want to do something different to make it right. Ray, final word.
Wow, that was deep. I think one of the issues is that we've all, I won't say we all, but a lot of us have been very comfortable. We're living a fairly comfortable economic life, social life, and so forth. And so it's easy to just kind of fall into that comfort level and zone and not take up the banner of what's going on with us as a people. So the climate is definitely changed, I believe. And I think that people who've been comfortable for a long time are willing to step out of that comfort zone and do something proactive. And myself included. So yeah, I'm just grateful for where we're at and sad at the same time. It's a paradox. It makes for a lot of anxiety right now. And I'm just hoping that the outcome of it will be fruitful for us as a people as it pertains to legislation and real change as a people and as a country.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I thank you both for joining me on today's episode. Very fruitful, rich conversations. And I'm looking forward to what the next step is in our community to truly impacting and looking for the sustainable change that we are seeking. We're tired. We are tired. And I'm quite fine in my Black skin making people uncomfortable. I am quite fine when I walk into a room and I am the only melanated person in that room making people uncomfortable. I will not adapt to your comfort. And that is what we need to teach our kids. Ray, Kathy, I appreciate you both more than you know. Always enjoy these conversations with you all. And thanks for joining us today.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
We have a responsibility to ourselves to rebuild our community. I've always said that desegregation hurt us more than it helped us because we got caught up in the abolishment of Jim Crow and lost sight of taking care of our own and creating our own. We can't wait on these companies to post empty platitudes online to make us feel like they're standing with us. Instead, we must hold them accountable to get into action and show us that they not only stand with us, but for us. Until we build a collective efficacy within our own community, no other community will invest in us. I thank you so much for joining me and my guests today. You can catch me here next week, same place, same time. Peace.